Albrecht, at the time CEO of HBO, was arrested for punching and choking his girlfriend in a parking lot outside a Vegas casino after a boxing match. The girlfriend, TV reporter Carla Jensen, refused to press charges, but a few days later, Time Warner forced Albrecht to resign, and it was revealed this wasn't the first time he'd beaten up a girlfriend. Now, months later, Albrecht and Jensen have announced they are getting married. Does that sound like a match made in heaven to you? But of course, they aren't the only ones who appear to outsiders to be mixed up in a troubled relationship. What can you do to avoid this kind of relationship yourself? And if you do find yourself in a problem relationship, what can you do about it? Today, Simone Wright is here. She's author of Survive and Thrive, Overcoming the End of Your Relationship and Healing Completely for Yourself. And later in the show, family therapist and talk show host Dr. Sherry Myers will join us. She has some questions that will help you determine if you're involved with the wrong person. Pleasure to have you here today, Simone.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Now, I don't know these people, and I wish them well, but should you marry the guy who punches you in the parking lot and chokes you in the parking lot before the wedding?
Well, oftentimes we're not thinking all that clearly when it comes time to the wedding, but you have to understand that there's a whole lot of extenuating circumstances that both parties are balanced in that are leading to this relationship. It has absolutely nothing to do with what happened in that parking lot.
Are you saying they're both codependent?
Well, I'm sure that that's probably part of it. That's probably part of it for sure. But there's a whole background and a whole history behind each one of those people that they're bringing into this dynamic. And that's why I say it really has very little to do with what happened in the parking lot. It has to do with their history. It has to do with their baggage. It has to do with their past beliefs and understandings about what relationships mean.
Right. But so how do you get to whatever led them there? And that's another question in itself. But how can you marry the guy who punches you in the parking lot? And by the way, it happened, and he had consequences too. I mean, he lost his job, and he's gone on to other things. And the interesting thing is these are both professional people with careers. I mean, they're not in a trailer park somewhere.
Right.
But yet they're doing things just as crazy as the people that we might laugh about.
Right, right. Well, I think we're all sort of damaged in some way or another, and so it sort of doesn't do us any justice to sort of point fingers and say that the only messed up people come from a trailer park.
Right. Well, obviously not.
Yeah, yeah. But each one of those people, as I said before, has a history, and you have to determine what love and what relationship and what happiness means to each of those people that would make it okay, especially for the woman to say I do to a man who would abuse her.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, realistically, just looking, okay, we know that he has a history. I mean, Time Warner did force him to resign because it came out that they had to pay off a former employee that he had assaulted in their office in Century City and paid her a lot of money, and he was dating her at the time, apparently. But at any rate, so people do the same thing over and over again, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So if he's beating her up before the wedding, presumably, okay, we had a talk the other night, and you said people are usually on their best behavior before they get, when you first get to know each other, you're all putting out the most positive.
Right.
Presumably.
Right.
So if this is the positive stuff, what is the negative stuff going to look like?
Right. Usually when you're dating you put your best foot forward, you're on your best behavior, you're watching your P's and Q's. So yeah, if this is what's happening before the I do's are said, then chances are pretty good that it's going to continue. I mean, I think without any sort of concerted effort to understand the dynamic in that relationship, nothing is going to change. Right. And I think that's why relationships escalate into abusive relationships, and they get worse and worse.
Well, and hasn't it already? And again, I'm not even really focused on these people. I mean, I'm using them as an example, unfortunately, but because I've heard so many stories like this, where again, the woman refuses to press charges.
Right.
Oh, I'm sure she's saying, oh, but he really loves me,
Right. Right.
And
to her, she believes that he does. That's the belief system that she has operating in her head, that despite the behavior, the outward appearances of the abuse, in her mind she believes that that's what love is, that her belief system makes that correct and makes that all right. And she makes decisions based on that, That probably feels comfortable to her in some way. I don't know her history, I don't know what her past was, but she has a belief that says it doesn't matter if he beats me, I know he loves me. Or I believe he does. Or
that shows that he loves me. I don't know. That's just kind of, I've never understood that, because I personally believe, I have what I call a zero tolerance policy toward hitting people. I mean, I'm not going to hit you, and you aren't going to hit me.
Right, right.
And I also believe, by the way, I don't believe in spanking children. I think that you've lost control of your children if you have to resort to physical. There is a way you can be firm with your children and discipline them. I absolutely believe that. But in other words, and I'm not just saying this about the guys. Some people think it's cute when women slap their boyfriends or something. To me, first time would be the last time and the only time. And I mean for anybody.
Right.
People don't hit me and I don't hit them, and there's a reason for that.
But you have solid parameters. You have solid parameters that you're not willing to compromise on. It's apparent from this woman, again, and I don't know her history, that her parameters are different than yours.
And how many people have that parameter, though? Because I hear that so often that, you know, the women, well, again, not to just put this on the women, because we're, you know, women slap their boyfriends. I'm just trying to understand how people can come up with that it's okay for somebody to hit you. It's
a belief system, Greg. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's not rational. Somebody smacks you, a rational person will leave. But oftentimes our belief systems aren't based in rationality.
And do people think then that that maybe that everybody does it? Is that the kind of the thing that will actually, you know, oh, he just had a bad day, and that sooner or later in a relationship every guy is going to hit a woman? Because I don't believe that. And like I say, and I don't think every woman hits a man or every parent has to hit their kids.
Right, right.
So
I think it's based on what you know growing up. If you come from an abusive background where that's what you saw, that's what you experienced, your mom hit your dad or your dad hit your mom, or there was some sort of dynamic in the relationship, growing up, that's all you know. So moving forward, you carry that packaging with you, and you pick partners who make that belief correct for you. You make that normal. So if that was your reality growing up, you will figure out a way to make that your reality as you get older. And so it's normal. It's just normal. He smacks me. That's okay.
How common do you think that kind of thing is? I mean, what percentage of people, you know, and again, I'm not trying to come across as the perfect person and that life is, you know, that everything is hunky-dory and easy, and that I realize that, you know, as we said on the phone too, you know, Shakespeare had the great quote that, you know, the course of true love never did run smooth. And I guess what I'm saying is people can disagree or even argue, I think, in a respectable way. I don't know how the right way to say it. But what percentage of people, how many people are dysfunctional? Or, I mean, or what kind of relationships? I mean, do you think the majority of relationships are that way these days? Or certainly watching TV, I think that if you turn on these reality TV shows, I mean, where they're all stabbing each other in the back and.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're fed all that sort of stuff on television.
And partly, I do blame it on TV, by the way. Not just their background as kids, but what you see watching on TV.
It's all over the place. But I can't honestly tell you what the statistics are. I don't know. But I think every relationship has its dysfunction in some way. The way to be successful through that is understanding that those dysfunctions really rarely have anything to do with your partner. It's what you carry into the relationship in regards to your belief systems. And again, to go back to whatever the dynamic was that woman grew up with that makes it okay for her to accept abuse, or that the man grew up with that makes it okay for him to treat a woman that way. And we've all got our stuff, we've all got our issues, we've all got our habits and our foibles. So I think if it's a number, well, I'd say 100% of them are in some way dysfunctional. But it's figuring out how to work within that dysfunction so that you can heal it, so that you don't have to do it again.
I did a show the other day, then the guest said you get a little bit jaded as you get older. By this age, we both think it's 100%, I guess. I don't know.
But if it's true, if we're all some way dysfunctional, then how do you operate? How do you operate? How can you go out into the world and create a relationship knowing that everybody's got their stuff?
Well, and one reason I wanted to do this show is just that I think it's important to point out to people that, again, not that I believe in blaming the victim, because I don't, but yet again, it's interesting how much in these situations that, you know, you talk about like the enabler or something, but the person really does, I hate to say it, but allow it to continue.
Yes, they do.
And it's sometimes on both sides.
Yep. Because
honestly, a lot of times if you really look at the behavior by the men and the women, or whatever the relationship is or the situation, you know, both parties probably share some blame in it if you're trying to assign blame, or
well,
I mean, you know.
I don't think blame is the right word. I think responsibility is the right word,
exactly.
and it's because when you start flinging blame around, people put their defenses up and say, you know, don't you blame me for anything. You're never responsible for your partner's behavior. If your partner hits you, whether it's the guy or the girl, it's their stuff. But what you do have to come to understand, what you do have to be responsible for, is understanding why you chose that person, why you pursued that relationship, what beliefs you have that make it okay to stay.
Right. Why don't you walk out the
why
door?
you don't bolt the second he
Exactly.
even, raises his voice to you. There's a belief system behind that. Why is that okay? And a lot of abused men and women have belief systems that being abused isn't as bad as being alone.
Exactly.
So it's coming to understand that, and it not being about blame, but I think everybody needs to take responsibility for what they're carrying into the relationship. If somebody smacks you and you stay, you have to realize that there's something going on within you that makes that okay.
We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Dr. Sherry Myers, family therapist and talk show host. Great to have you here today, Dr. Myers.
Wonderful to be here, Greg.
Pleasure. So, should you marry the guy who punches you and chokes you in the parking lot?
Well, hell no. Of course not.
Shake my hand on that one.
Yes.
Okay, let's just say that how that is.
I was thinking about Chris and, is it Lisa Jensen?
Carla Jensen.
Carla Jensen. And often, this is an opportunity to create something anew, because there was such a shattering. It wasn't that it went by and went underground. It's public. We're talking about it. People are talking about it. He lost his job or was forced into quitting his job or resigning. So, and now this is very public. And sometimes if we're willing to take responsibility and use something like this to go, whoa, what's happening in my life? Sometimes it takes a crash in order to wake us up.
Well, that was a crash.
I would like to begin to think that maybe this is an awakening for them, because we don't know what's happened between when she got hit and when she said yes to be engaged. And it might be the kind of abuse profile that you were referring to earlier. But sometimes when we have a fall from grace, it takes us out of our ego and takes us out of, he may have been an alcoholic, a control freak, all of these negative signs.
I think he did admit he had started using alcohol again after several years away from it.
Right. So he was using drugs, which is a fatal flaw for relationships. He was violent, another fatal flaw for relationships, and probably was amazingly controlling, another red flag, fatal flaw for relationships. So those are three signs that if you're with somebody that does that, you don't want to go there. However, maybe this was such a slap on the face that it allows them to go, whoa, what kind of path are we going down and how do we change?
But don't you think that realistically it's probably a downhill path at this point?
I don't know. Let's be positive for one moment.
But I hate to say this, but see, a lot of women, like I've seen this, on Oprah or something, where they have the thing where the guy cheated on her 13 times, and she hugs and cries, and I'll take you back, honey, I forgive you. And then he does it again, and he does it 12 more times, and he does it the 13th time, and he does it the 14th time. At what point do you say, okay, look, people don't change. This guy has been doing this. He's done it once. He's going to do it again. At what point are you really allowing him to continue to do it?
Well, what we don't want to be are victims. And one has to take responsibility, as Simone was talking about earlier, of victim consciousness. So if I am someone who expects to be hurt in relationship, who expects that men could be jerks, or a woman will cheat on me, or whatever our expectations are, we will create that and we will allow it.
Right.
So
they're definitely
the buck
it.
has to stop here. If I'm saying in any way, hitting's okay, or I forgive him, or it's okay you cheat.
Would you forgive somebody who hits you? And
No, I wouldn't,
you,
but that's not
I mean,
my upbringing. I was trained, that's a boundary for me. So there's no question, someone even gets pretty angry and I will not tolerate that. So we each have our cushion or our boundaries around what we will tolerate. And I think it's important for people to consciously take a look at what they're attracting into their relationship and what from this point on is really allowable. What do they want? Because sometimes when we're in unconsciousness, we don't think about what we want. We almost expect, if we're victims, to be victimized. And the buck can stop here. It can change today and right now, but it takes stepping out of unconsciousness and automatic behavior and into consciousness.
Well, there are a couple of good points there, but I think of something, maybe it was what Simone said to me, or in her book, or when we were talking, that the issues of self-esteem. I mean, to what extent is this just a matter of low self-esteem if you think that it's okay for somebody to stand there and hit you, or that you're willing to put up with it?
It's low self-esteem. We do not value ourselves. And if we don't value ourselves, we're not going to take care of ourselves. We have to be, you know, there's an old saying, we have to be our own best friend, but that is so intrinsically true. Because for any relationship to survive and thrive, it has to have a basis of friendship. A friendship with ourselves and friendship with our partner. If we're not inherently friendly with ourselves, if on any level abuse is okay, we are our own enemy.
Well, that's the thing. You know, again, not that everything has to be easy and perfect, but yet some of these relationships, at least from the outside, you know, when people say toxic relationships, you just think, well, are these people having any fun? Do they enjoy the relationship? What do they get out of this? And why would they even want to be in it?
Well,
because as an outsider, you're thinking, what in the
okay, but you're reacting to two little tidbits of information.
Right.
Abuse, alcohol, big problem, got fired, and now they're getting married.
And punching.
Well,
and
yeah, oh, that's really bad. I'm not condoning. That's really bad behavior. But we truly don't know if there's been any change. So, you know, I have couples sit on the couch across from me, and they come in and they're so separated. But I have come to believe that there's a path back to love. That it takes changing the ratio of negative to positive.
Sure.
Right now, if the relationship, for a relationship to survive and thrive, using Simone's title.
Sure. We're getting a plug in her.
Yes,
for her
that's right. For a relationship to really thrive, the ratio of positive to negative needs to be 5 to 1.
5 to 1.
There's going to be negative in every relationship. There's going to be criticism and defensiveness, and sometimes we shut down, and sometimes we're really unhappy. But if the ratio is 5 positive to every negative, that relationship will grow and thrive, and our hearts will continue to grow. If that ratio changes or is reverse, 5 to 1, you're looking at a disaster.
Right, right.
The negatives, the positives have to outweigh the negatives for any relationship to
You would
work.
hope, because otherwise, what's the point?
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
just beat yourself up. I don't know.
Well, unless you believe that relationships are pain, and then it's time to do your own
I
work.
guess the tortured love kind of thing. I
That's
don't know. I
right.
wasn't into that kind of
Hang me on the wall now. It's okay, but that's the victim. The victim will go, oh, mea culpa, poor me. Life is hell. Life is hell.
Well, you have your test. How do you know if you're dating the wrong person or involved with the wrong person in the wrong kind of relationship?
Well, okay, so question number 1, is your partner available? Are they wanting to be in relationship? Are there lots of excuses for them that they're always busy? Are they too busy for love? That's
now,
a big red
now
flag.
in what sense? Meaning that when you call to do something, they don't want to do it, or when they're there, they're not even there, or in what?
Available. They're not when they're with you, they're available. There's time for you. They're not always working all the time or out with their buds, drinking all the time. That, you know, they are there and sober and available for love. Another is, are we in love with our partner's potential? Because sometimes we fall in love with the hope of what can be. If only they change, or this change, or maybe when we get married, or when we really settle down, and we're in love with potential versus what really is.
Do women just, this is, I don't want to say stereotypical or whatever, but just from your point of view, do women think that when they get married, the guy's going to change?
Yes.
And usually for the better, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I admit it. You know, I keep thinking, well, with my love. No, it's
that
with
you
love.
will change him, that he will be so.
Well, or with love, that love changes, that love transforms. And there is a truth to that, but it's also rather naive and innocent. You know, but
well,
I will hold on to that
God
belief.
bless the innocence and all of that, but
Yes.
unfortunately, as I say, we get jaded as we get older.
So another question to ask is, do we share the same values? Because that can destroy a relationship. At first, when we first meet someone, the differences can be cute,
Yep.
And it depends on how deep the differences are. So,
well, that's the thing I always
some-
think before marriage. If you know that something drives you crazy before you get married, you know that when it's 10 or 20 years later down the road you've been married, you know it's going to be driving you up the wall and out the door.
Yeah, well, not even, it could be months. It doesn't have to be years, because when we're in the glory of love or the glory of a goal, so let's say the goal is to be married, and we have this illusion of what marriage might mean. And so we ignore this and we ignore that and we won't look at that, and okay, he has or she has a little anger problem. It's okay, we'll deal with it. Let's just get married first. That little anger problem, when we're in each other's face all the time, is just going to grow. And those things that drive us crazy before marriage are going to be like things scratching our skin afterwards. You need to work things out and be realistic before you ever commit to a long-term relationship.
We'll be right back. And we are back today talking about how to thrive to survive, survive to thrive.
Both.
So how important is basic compatibility?
I think basic compatibility is really important. Now, differences can add a lot of sexuality and excitement, but it is the sameness that gives us that sense of home and that we're safe. So we want a nice balance between the two. But the compatibility in terms of values, basic core values, how we look at life,
Sure.
how we live our life, needs to be the same.
Simone?
And I have to agree. I think part of the dating process, so sometimes because of the desire to be married, as the doctor mentioned earlier, kind of sometimes stuffs that under the rug. And oftentimes I know that a lot of people, especially women, and this isn't to generalize women, but we often like to mold ourselves into what we think our partner is looking for. And we show up at the relationship really not honoring who we truly are, because we're afraid if we do, we'll lose that potential.
And then maybe they'll later become resentful because of that?
Yeah.
Well, a classic line is, "You've changed, what happened?" Whether it be, or we get disappointed. I know a good friend of mine recently was newly in love. And a newly in love person, your brain in test studies, when they look at a brain in love and a brain on cocaine, everything is ignited the same. You can't tell the difference because the chemistry is all lit. So new love feels that way. So when we are newly in love and then have our first disappointment, it's like the rug falls out. You collapse in the disappointment. So when we have these expectations that, oh boy, we're gonna get married, this relationship's happening, we're committed, everything is good, and then it's not. A lot of times we, in a way, collapse in our disappointment. And that's where the work has to begin.
Well, I thought that was interesting because I think you both kind of say that, I mean, despite the jaded reporter in me that asked the questions, I still am an idealist, I think, and I believe in true love and all of that. But yet you say, though, that kind of this search for, Mr. and Mrs. Right can actually be the thing that, I mean, that sounds, in other words, sometimes I feel like people have low standards when they put up with the abuse and being beat, but yet you kind of argue that maybe having the high standards or the fairy tale that you're going for is just as bad?
I think seeking love, because I'm a romantic too, and there's nothing that feels better than being in love. But we have to work at staying in love. It's not, once we move through the idealized fantasy of the one, then the work begins. And it's really about keeping our love alive. And some of that is our job.
Sometimes maybe it's the next one or the next one.
Right.
Well, and I think that's where the disappointment comes up when when that buzz, I call it the love buzz, when the love buzz wears off and you settle into reality, and the knight in shining armor takes off his suit of armor and he's there in his sweatpants, and you look at this man and he's a real man, and he's not the fantasy anymore, or the real woman, the goddess doesn't exist anymore. That's where love comes into action. That's where when you look at your partner and all of the reality, the little warts start to show up, and you look that person in the eye and you say, my loving you right now, this is what it's about. My accepting you exactly how you show up, because if I can't do it for you, you're not going to do it for me. That's what love is. It's not the buzz. It's not the Although
And
that-
both parties making an effort, because it's not easy, and then it's not all about, you know.
Well, I remember there's this great line that says, it's not about falling into love. Falling into love is easy. It's about rising to love. And that's what we have to learn how to do, how to rise to love.
I love it. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sherry Myers and Simone Wright. Her book
Thank you.
is Survive to Thrive. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.